Vamos dar início a esta sessão paralela sobre métodos de pesquisa quantitativa e qualitativa. Quero dar os parabéns à organização por este evento, por esta segunda edição deste congresso e por trazer a Estremoz e ao Alentejo e também por dar a oportunidade à Universidade de Évora de colaborar na organização deste evento e por, durante estes 2 dias, propor esta discussão alargada, científica e comunitária sobre a saúde mental. Em nome da Universidade de Évora, damos os parabéns à organização e desejamos uma boa continuação do trabalho. Nesta sessão temos 2 intervenções, a intervenção da doutora Célia Sales, que é psicóloga clínica, é terapeuta familiar e também é investigadora na Universidade do Porto, e depois uma segunda comunicação apresentada pelo Dr. João Paulo Albuquerque, psiquiatra e diretor clínico do Centro Dom Manuel Trindade Salgueiro em Assumar. Vou passar a palavra à doutora Célia.
Bom, então boa tarde. Som tá bom? E vou falar em inglês. Sim, acho que basta que haja uma pessoa que não fale português aqui. E acho que há. Sim, vou falar em inglês. So I'm presenting now a small exploratory study that we have been conducting concerning individualized measures. So for a while there's a research a network, an international group that is the IFAM group that has been interested on exploring to what extent and how we can personalize assessment in mental health and in routine evaluation services. So within there are several studies going on. Some of them were conducted here at the University of Évora, and some master theses have been done at the Department of Psychology concerning this topic. So today I'm presenting part of the results of the master thesis of Claudia Brinquet. She could not attend today, so I'm going to present some of the results. This study is about outcome measures, and in a way it might be a bit strange why we are studying methods, why spending so many years trying to understand a bit more about outcome measures, because there's lots of perhaps too much outcome measures. So in a way it happens, we are studying this and several other teams are studying this because outcome measures are changing in the way, in the context where they are currently being used. Traditionally, they were developed and much used in research. So we would have to measure our dependent variables when we would conduct research, evidence-based research mainly, so experimental. So we would use mainly outcome measures in mental health research, but not for practice. However, in the last 20 years, services are becoming, someone in the morning said, industrial. So in a way, quality of services is being a compulsory movement. What is happening all over Europe is that services have to prove that they are doing a good job. So they must show that the patients change, so they must use outcome measures and include them in their routine. But in part because of this compulsory use of outcome measures, there's a third domain that starts to emerge now. That is, to what extent, if we have to use outcome measures in our practice, could we also use it as an intervention tool? Could we use it in a useful way to do a better clinical job? So these are the three domains where we can think about using outcome measures, and our work is within this last domain. Of course, this last domain looks for another thing rather than the psychometrics, okay, thank you. The psychometrics, that is the quality, how as a measurement tool, what are the characteristics, the features of the value as a measurement tool, is something that is important in contexts of research and of course in routine evaluation. But when we start thinking about outcome measures as a clinical tool, there are other things that are important. That is, okay, it measures change well, but is it feasible? I mean, is it easy to use? Is it relevant? Is it relevant for practice? Does it give therapists or clients some useful input that makes practice better? Is it acceptable so people like or people don't like it? Can we use it with all our patients, with all the clinical population? So these are questions that come more important, that concern the clinical utility of measures, that should be addressed when we are thinking about using outcome measures in routine practice. So our study is about how relevant can be an individualized measure for practice. And that individualized measure is cyclops. Individualized measures are outcome measures, so measures that can, if applied before treatment and after treatment, that can measure change, psychological change. So individualized measures are those where the patients themselves can propose items. They can say what their problems are or what their goals are, and then we can measure change on these that are the priorities or something that bothers people. So as we can see, this is how Cyclops looks. Each person has his own personalized Cyclops because it's tailor-made, because it's unique. The first box, you say, what is the problem that troubles you most? And people write it down and then rate it for the duration and intensity. The second block, it's also a free text item that says another problem that bothers you. And then there's the third block, free text item, that is a problem, that is what I cannot do because of these problems. So you have three free text items, and the last one that is well-being, how well you have been feeling over the last week. So it's a very simple one-page questionnaire, and our curiosity here was if this is useful if we use it at intake. That is, everybody comes to the psychiatric service for an interview with a psychiatrist or a psychologist. If we ask people to fill this in before entering this clinical interview, to what extent what people say there is the same thing that the psychologist or the psychiatrist will capture during the clinical interview. Is it the same thing or is it different? So how close is Cyclops from clinical judgment? That was our question. And one way of starting to exploring this question it was our idea was simple. People would come, would fill it in before the first interview. Then they go to the first session with the psychologist. And then at the end, we ask the psychologist to fill it in as if he was the patient. So we would give the psychologist at the end the same Cyclops, and he would write down the problems. And then we would compare and we would see to what extent what the therapist saw was the same thing that the client wrote before. Why is this relevant? Is this relevant? It could be, because if there's coincidence, then perhaps we can use this as a reliable starting point for a clinical interview. In fact, Cyclops was developed in primary care settings in the UK before. Well, now I got to know 2 weeks ago that also in our primary care services we also have 15 minutes. So this was developed in UK because in 15 minutes doctors don't have time to ask people what the problems are, and so they use this to people fill it in the waiting room and then take it, and it's a good starting point. However, we wanted to know if in a psychiatric context this is helpful and if it is reliable. So it was our very simple design of this study. So we collected more data, but because we had much missing data at the end, we went out with 41 patients and 2 senior psychotherapists at the Espírito Santo Service of Mental Health and Psychiatry. And these were psychotherapists with much experience, 38 and 36 years of experience. So we used Cyclops and we used core outcome measure, that is a general measure of clinical distress, of psychological distress, and because has very good psychometric properties, it could be a good comparison comparing with Cyclops. So this is our design. We, as I explained before session, the patient fills it in, then the therapist, and then we asked, because this smiley face down there is that at the end of the session we asked patients to repeat the scoring, because during the first session the problem could change, and in a way if the therapist sees something that is different from the beginning, it might be that during the session the patient started to see other problems that were different. So in order to control for changes in the problems of patients during the first session, we asked them again at the end of the first session about the problems and their intensity. So these were the instruments that we used, and in terms of analysis, we've made something quite simple. So the 3 free texts items, we did a thematic analysis with blinded code by 3 independent coders. And then when we had these answers coded, we saw to what extent the therapist and the patient matched. So if they would, if the therapist indicated at least one problem that had been indicated by the client. So we did this thematic matching, and then also the scoring matching. And that the scoring matching, we did a correlation to what extent there's a correlation between the scorings of the therapist and the client, both in Cyclops and in core. So our results was surprisingly high concerning the thematic coincidence of cyclops, and also surprising concerning the non-matching between the scorings of cyclops. That means that in 71% of the cases, the therapist could identify at least one problem that was indicated in cyclops by the patient. But the intensity of these problems were not similar. Now, concerning core, and this is interesting, there was a high correlation between the scorings given by the patient and by the therapist. But if we look at the dimensions of core, the dimension of problems and the dimension of risk, those are the dimensions where this coincidence or similarity of scoring is significant, which means, and that this is interesting, that really these therapists are trained and they are very good on identifying symptoms and on identifying risks. Concerning this check that I told you, to what extent there's changes in the complaints that people indicate because of during the session. In fact, almost there was no change in neither in the scorings or themes of cyclops, and in fact there was a high correlation with the core, so people tend to maintain their answers before and after the first session. If we consider that the gold standard for diagnose is clinical judgment, it's given by a clinical interview, what we see is that cyclops seems to be an accurate tool to inform about pre-treatment clinical conditions of patients, because in fact cyclops gives almost coincident information. In a way, if the therapist looks at cyclops, you might think that probably what you will find out during the 1 hour interview will be there. So it might help saving time, and can be a good starting for that interview. However, the intensity of problems it doesn't capture, so it's not so accurate. This can be complemented by the core, that is really an accurate measure of the intensity of problems and risk. So as the developers of core aimed, in fact, if we look at the core and we see that there is risk there, probably there is, it is, let me say, in conclusion, looking at cyclops, we can see what troubles people, and looking at core, we can see how much these troubles, these problems impair people. So it is useful, the answer, so cyclops is useful, but is not enough. This is one of the limits that we are dealing with and studying, the limits of individualized measures, and this seems to indicate that we should look at it with more detail, because we still don't know much about the psychometrics of these measures, and these results also point out for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Célia. I'm so sorry I didn't speak in English before, because I forget that is a space with people from different countries, and I didn't realize that in the moment. I'm so sorry. Well, we go to continue with this parallel section now with the presentation of Dr. João Paulo Albuquerque. He is a psychiatric and he is the clinic director from Centro Dom Manuel Trindade Salgueiro em Assumar, in this region. Please.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's a big pleasure to be here with you. I'll do my best to speak in English in a way that everybody understands me. I was not ready for this. I hope that will be translation, but we'll see. I asked Célia to help me if I need some help, okay? So the slides are in Portuguese. I'll try to speak in English. And this presentation is also about measures. I would start by saying that I don't like this kind of work, measuring stuff. I don't like it. But I do this also. It's not by chance. It was we feel that it was important for us, for our work, okay? The context, it's really important to understand why this study has become. This is the center, Centro de Recuperação de Menores do Manuel Trindade Salgueiro. It's a rehabilitation center, but where we join all the kind of support that some people could need. We have residential support, so people live there. We have the rehabilitation support with activities structured, defined by the interest of the person. And we have also the mental health staff that could help in those kind of needs. And this is important because this creates a very complex team, and to join all these efforts in a way that works well together, without not too much tension, without superimpose one to each other, it's really difficult. It's a challenge every day, without pushing too much to the side of the rehabilitation, without looking at the disease that could be there, or without pushing too much to the side of the mental health problems and looking only as a patient. All these dynamics, it's really difficult to work and to find and balance in all these interventions. So that's why this came, okay? So the context, it's about the disease in people with disability, with intellectual disability, and you use the term intellectual developmental disturbance, which is the term that the ICD-11 will adopt, and also the DSM-5, it's accepted the second term, parallel to intellectual disability, okay? The nomenclature now, it's important also because focus more on the functionality, the intellectual disability, or in the to be a dysfunction, a disorder, which put the problem more in the mental health services. The ICD, as I told you, maintained the term disorder, so give us awareness about the importance of the mental health services being ready to help these people, okay? And that is because we have some figures here. We have in this population with the intellectual disability, we have much more prevalence of mental health problems. We have these figures about autism and intellectual disability, other figures about other kind of mental health problems. More or less 40% of prevalence in the people with IDD, okay? But not only in mental health, also in somatic problems, okay? As you see, all kind of systems and organs, we have also much more problems than we have in the general population. Okay, so that's why it's important to congregate all these efforts to work with these persons. Our center, just to give you an idea what we're talking about, it's a center that where lives 120 clients or residents. At the beginning, they have to be between the 3 and 17 years of age, and all of them with IDD. Okay, because we have this structure, this team with all the kind of support that people may need. We are a reference. I can say that at this kind of intervention. So we have people from all the country with double diagnosis. Double diagnosis in mental health, it's usually associated with addiction problems with some other disease at the same time. So our president of the National Plan for Mental Health proposed to talk about diagnosis double. Change the words, so try to distinguish the context we are talking about, okay? Double diagnosis double, okay, whatever. It's our team. As you see, we have in the top, okay, all this, you don't see it from here, okay. Well, but the people on the top, it's what you usually find in the rehabilitation centers. But then we have all the part of the residential care with all the people that take care of the basic needs of these persons. And we have at your left the people from the health staff, okay? Which is not usual in the institutions of rehabilitation, okay? So why to do this? That I've told you. First, because it's difficult to congregate all the interventions, and second, and also very important, because the technicians it's very difficult for them to find instruments for measure what they need to measure to work and to plan the interventions with the instruments that are usually available. Normally they are available for people without disability, but they don't work very well with people with disability. So we have to find one, if there is, that it's good, especially for people, as you see, with profound and severe disability. Okay, they are the most challenging to assess. So if there's no instrument they can find, they try to construct, based on their experience and on their difficulties, a new instrument designed for this kind of population. Okay, so it was quite an ambitious project. It takes us since the final of 2014 until now. Now we are in the phase of working all the data we have, try to correlate all the data. It's lots of them. I will not put that in discussion. And well, the objectives are inside those needs that I've told you. Okay. One of them, very important also, especially in the mental health professionals, it's to give more importance, more awareness, more conscious about this problem. Usually in Portugal, I think everybody knows that we talk about disability as a separate group that only needs some help. In Britain it's learning disability. Okay, so it connects with the support in learning problems or some special part of this daily life that you need some support, but they usually don't connect with the mental health problems, and they are really, really very connected. So put people more awareness about that is really important, okay? And we have to give them data, objective data, so they really believe in us, okay? These are the instruments that we have used. The PASAD for psychiatry, which we use the version for child and adolescents. Then for nursing, the NOC, it's nursing outcome classification. And then for the social services, we don't have any good instruments, so we construct one instrument based on what we need. In psychology, we use the VISC, but as you see, then it has been not a good choice. It's important to see that it's not a good choice anyway. And other areas like physiotherapy, psychomotricity, occupational therapy, speech therapy, they also create total new instruments based on what they need to assess in this population. Okay. This is I will not show you this. It's about this instrument, specific instrument. It's very complex, very detailed, very. It's a lot of work in it. I don't go for that. What we have in the results, as you see, this is the PASAD in the psychiatry. We have all these diagnoses that are measured by the instrument. You see there is almost everybody with some diagnosis, 91% of the sample. Especially with profound disability, more autism, with severe disability, more hyperactivity disorder, and then other very old kind of psychiatric pathology are present, as you can see. Okay, including, I don't know if it's there, not in this scan, but if we go to other people with moderate or less severe disability, we also find a lot of personality problems, okay? This is the nursing results. They only apply the autonomy part of the scale. That's because other things will be superimposed in the other evaluations, so that's what we get with nurse. And we can see in detail about feeding, put yourself, hygiene, bath, everything you see, clothing, everything. This is another way of showing the result. As you see, feeding, it's where they are more autonomous. The other aspects of daily life, they have really big difficulties to do alone. This is the social interview. This is how many institutions have they been before being with us, and majority have been before in 2 institutions, all the others in 1 institution at least. This has to do about the kind of people we take. Usually are people that go from one institution to other institution to other institution, and when nobody can deal with them, they ask us to take care of them. And it's not because we are better than the others, it's just because we have more staff to deal with more problems. That's our structure that enables us to work with those persons, okay? Now the ages, as you see, it's numbered, it's easy for everybody. Where they come from all the country, and especially from the counties near our county, or towns with bigger population as Lisbon. Okay. How many years? As you see, it's a lot. It's a long time in residence with us. Usually are situations that are clinical, very, very complicated, and also socially very without support. So they have everything to stay with us, some of them all their lives. As you see, the familial support, it's very, most of them doesn't have any person they can get help, and some of them have father or mother, but most of the time also with problems, so it's very difficult to find support out of the institution. This is about the possibility to go again, return to the community of reference, and as you see, all of them, most all of them, they don't have this possibility. What we do most of the time, it's try after they have the 18 years, they are adults, try to get support from other institutions for adults, which is not always possible. It's about being in school or no. Half of them are in school. And those being in school, most of them in the regular, the common school, okay? Only a small part have support in the special needs school. Mostly not because of the disability, the intellectual disability, mostly because of the behavioral problems that they have at the same time. This is about problems with in the family. Half of them also have problems with the family. And now we come to psychology. It's difficult for you to see, but what you see here, it's the vast majority of the sample just specify as non-specified. Okay, we cannot cope with the risk, the intellectual coefficient. So this just means that risk is not a good instrument to organize or give us an idea of what, how could we work, what are the parts of functioning that could be used in the plan. After this, we are trying to find some more simple instruments that can be useful to this kind of people, with not so much information as VISC, but information that can differentiate different levels of working in this cognitive, this intellectual setting. Okay. At least it was important because of give us this conscious. This is not a way to show this. Okay, all those that have a punctuation 40 to 45 or more than 45, as you see, is very near to moderate disability, so not good for the most profound levels. Okay. Now, the part I told you about physiotherapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, this is the diagram. They establish 4 domains. You see the 1, and then the 2, and then the 3, with different separate areas. And it's easy to see in here. About basic functioning, feeding, breathing, it's what works better. But in all the other contexts about movement, sensorium, communication, expression, all these areas are very, very compromised in this population. Okay. This other way to show the same thing. And I just give you how this works. We have to see the results for all the sample. Now, how to get this from one person? Does this evaluation with so much instruments, with so many people involved, work to in practice to plan the intervention in one person? And it seems so. Okay, just one case, for example. 13 years old, 6 years in our institution, with 2 institutionalizations previous to our one. where they come from, is in school. She cannot come back to his home community. She has a person, a reference person to contact with, and no problems in the family as we know. Okay? Psychiatric diagnostic, autism. In psychology, there's no specification about KI level. And we have the graphics in the functioning in his autonomy, in different daily activities. And then about his functioning therapies. No problems about cardiorespiratory functioning, very limited in language, communication also with lots of difficulties, and with some limitations about the sensory-motor part. Okay? So he gives us all the figure. Important to understand with who are this person. Okay? The limitations, well, the first one is because we have all our work is work with the persons. We don't have special staff to do research. So this research can over all the work we have to do every day. So it's very difficult to be able to do all this. We also have a short period of time to do the work, and it is lots of people and lots of items to evaluate. Okay? So these are the main difficulties. Then other difficulties has to do with the population itself. Most of them are medicated, and the medication change the way the symptoms and the characteristics of the person appear. So we have to count on that also. Then those limitations that has to do with the disability, the capacity to understand what we are looking for, the capacity to express themselves or to organize the concept we are talking about. All of these are limitations that even trying to find the best instrument are always there, and we see that influence the results. That's what we say in the conclusions. Even with all this effort, it's also really, really difficult. It's always a challenge to assess people with intellectual disability. Anyway, we are more, with this kind of work, we can have more secure data, so we can work with and that gives us the chance to organize the interconnection with all our interventions. Okay? One of the main, all the results are expected. One that it's different from what we see in the literature usually. It's the prevalence of psychiatric problems, which is 91%. Usually we talk about 40% in this population, 40-50%. But as I told you, this is a very special sample that came from different institutions and have lots of problems, and they are in our institution because of our model of intervention. Okay, so in our space, this is a biased sample. You understand that? So, to conclude, what we learn is a valuable work, this that we have done. It's important to show how big this problem is and how the mental health professionals must start to sensibilize themselves about this population. And of course, we need to see more and more works of this kind with this population to validate these results and to show that it's not only our experience, but it's everywhere. Okay? Thank you.